She stopped to help a stranded man on a deserted road, only to realize too late he was the mafia boss everyone feared, the owner of the empire no one dared to name. Before we start, I love seeing this community grow. Feel free to introduce yourself below. The snowstorm hit with the fury of a beast unleashed, transforming the highway into a treacherous white void. Dr. Elena Morrison gripped her steering wheel tighter, her knuckles pale against the leather as visibility dropped to mere feet. The pediatric conference in Boston had run late, and now she was paying the price, crawling along Route 95 at 15 miles per hour while her wipers fought a losing battle against the relentless snow. She'd been driving for 20 minutes when she spotted the dark shape on the shoulder. A vehicle, its hazard lights barely visible through the whiteout conditions. Elena's first instinct was to keep moving, to reach the safety of the next town before the roads became completely impassable. But years of emergency medicine had trained her to respond to distress, and something about the abandoned luxury sedan pulled at her conscience. Making a split-second decision, she eased her SUV onto the shoulder, her tires crunching through 6 inches of fresh powder. As she drew closer, she could make out a figure standing beside the vehicle, a man in what appeared to be an expensive suit, completely inappropriate for a New England blizzard. No winter coat, no proper boots, just tailored perfection being buried by nature's indifference. Elena grabbed her emergency kit and stepped out into the storm, immediately feeling the wind's bite through her winter jacket. "Are you okay?" she called out, fighting to be heard over howling gusts. The man turned, and even through the curtain of snow, Elena felt the impact of his presence. He was tall, powerfully built, with dark hair already dusted white and a perfectly groomed beard that framed a face of dangerous elegance. His eyes, dark and calculating, swept over her with an intensity that made her pause mid-step. "Car trouble," he said simply, his voice carrying an undercurrent of controlled frustration. There was an accent there, subtle but unmistakable, Italian heritage wrapped in American education. No signal to call for assistance. Elena noticed he didn't say, "Call a tow truck," or "Call AAA." Just assistance, as if help materialized on command in his normal world. "I have signal," she offered, pulling out her phone. "Let me call." "No signal works out here," he interrupted, then seemed to catch himself. "But I appreciate the offer, miss." "Dr. Morrison, Elena." She moved closer, assessing him with clinical efficiency. No visible injuries, but his lips held a faint blue tinge. Hypothermia was a real concern. "How long have you been out here?" 30 minutes. Maybe 40. He glanced at a watch that probably cost more than her car. "My driver took ill suddenly. I pulled over to assist him, and when I tried to restart the vehicle..." He gestured at the sedan with controlled annoyance. "Where's your driver now?" "I sent him ahead with another vehicle. They should have returned by now, but the storm..." For the first time, she detected something resembling concern in his voice. Not for himself, for the delay, perhaps, or the loss of control over his situation. Elena made a decision. "You can't stay out here. The temperature's dropping fast, and this storm is only getting worse." "My SUV has 4-wheel drive. I can take you to the next town. There's a hotel about 10 miles up." The man studied her for a long moment, and Elena had the unsettling sensation of being thoroughly evaluated. His gaze held the weight of someone accustomed to reading people instantly, determining threats and calculating outcomes in seconds. Finally, he nodded. "You're certain? I wouldn't want to impose." "You'll freeze if you stay here," she said practically. "That's not an imposition. That's basic human decency." Something flickered in his dark eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or amusement. Basic human decency. I don't encounter that often in my line of work. "Which is?" Elena asked as they trudged through the snow toward her vehicle. "I handle family business," he replied smoothly. "Import-export. Legitimate enterprises, but competitive." The way he said competitive carried implications that made Elena's instincts prickle. Once inside her SUV, she cranked the heat to maximum. Her passenger settled into the seat with unconscious grace, somehow maintaining an aura of command even while accepting her help. She noticed details now, the precision of his suit's tailoring, The quality of his leather shoes that were definitely not meant for snow, the subtle but expensive cologne that filled her car. "I'm Salvatore," he offered, as she carefully maneuvered back onto the highway. Salvatore Castellano. The name meant nothing to Elena, though she thought she detected significance in the way he said it, as if it should open doors or end conversations. "Well, Mr. Castellano, let's hope the hotel has rooms available. In weather like this, everyone's going to be looking for shelter. I'm certain accommodations can be arranged," he said with quiet confidence that bordered on absolute certainty. They drove in silence for several minutes, the only sounds the struggling wipers and the wind battering her SUV. Elena focused on keeping them safely on the road, while her passenger seemed content to observe her with that same calculating intensity. "You said you're a doctor?" he finally asked. "Pediatric surgeon. I specialize in congenital heart defects." She risked a glance at him. "Children born with hearts that don't work quite right. I help fix them. Noble work." There was no mockery in his tone, just a kind of distant respect. "You save lives." "I try to. Not always successfully, but I try." The admission came easily. She'd long ago made peace with the limitations of medicine. "What about your family business? Import-export, you said?" "We facilitate the movement of goods," Salvatore replied carefully. "Specialized items that require discretion and reliability. My family has maintained these operations for 3 generations." 3 generations. The phrase resonated with implications. Elena's medical training had brought her into contact with various communities, including families whose legitimate businesses often served as fronts for less legal enterprises. The way Salvatore spoke, the careful phrasing, the emphasis on family, the generational aspect, triggered recognition in the back of her mind. "Must be challenging maintaining family traditions in modern business," she said neutrally. "Tradition is everything," he responded. And now there was steel beneath the smooth words. "Loyalty, honor, respect, these aren't negotiable. They're the foundation upon which empires are built. Empires, not businesses or companies, but empires." Elena's grip tightened slightly on the wheel. The hotel materialized through the snow like a beacon, a mid-range chain establishment that had never looked more welcoming. Elena pulled into the parking lot, already packed with vehicles seeking refuge from the storm. Inside, the lobby buzzed with stranded travelers, families with restless children, and a harried desk clerk trying to manage the chaos. Salvatore moved through the crowd with unconscious authority, people instinctively stepping aside to let him pass. Elena followed in his wake, feeling like she'd been caught in the orbit of something much larger than a simple Good Samaritan act. At the desk, the clerk's exhausted expression transformed to attention when Salvatore approached. "I need a suite," he said simply. "Sir, I'm afraid we're completely—" The clerk's words died as Salvatore placed something on the counter. Elena couldn't see what it was, but the effect was immediate. The clerk's face went pale, then carefully neutral. "Let me check our system again, Mr. Castellano." The clerk's fingers flew over the keyboard with newfound urgency. "Of course, Mr. Castellano. I believe I can accommodate you. Our presidential suite just became available." Elena watched this exchange with growing unease. Whatever Salvatore had shown the clerk had transformed impossible to immediate. That kind of influence didn't come from legitimate import-export businesses. "I'll need 2 rooms, Salvatore said, glancing at Elena. "The suite for myself, and your best available room for Dr. Morrison." "That's not necessary," Elena protested. "I can—" "You saved me from freezing in a snowstorm," Salvatore interrupted smoothly. "Allow me to express proper gratitude. Consider it a matter of honor." The way he said honor carried the weight of something sacred, something not to be refused without insult. Elena found herself nodding, accepting a keycard from the still pale clerk. As they moved toward the elevators, Salvatore's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, and Elena saw his jaw tighten fractionally. "Excuse me a moment," he said, stepping away to answer. His voice dropped to a low rumble she couldn't quite hear, but his body language spoke volumes. authority being reasserted, commands being issued. When he returned, his expression had hardened. My associates have located me. They'll be arriving within the hour. Associates? Elena echoed. Business rarely stops, even for snowstorms, he replied. But there was something new in his eyes now. Calculation, perhaps, or concern. Dr. Morrison, I find myself in your debt. If you ever require assistance, any assistance at all, please contact me. He produced a card from inside his jacket, simple and elegant with only a name and number. No business name, no title, no email, just Salvatore Castellano and a phone number. Elena accepted the card, feeling its expensive weight. I really just did what anyone would do. No, Salvatore said softly, and for the first time she heard genuine warmth in his voice. Most people would have driven past. They would have chosen their own safety over a stranger's need. You didn't. That matters. The elevator arrived, and they stepped inside. Elena's room was on the 3rd floor, Salvatore's suite on the 8th. As she prepared to exit, she turned back. Stay warm, Mr. Castellano, and maybe invest in a proper winter coat. He smiled, a real smile that transformed his dangerous elegance into something almost approachable. Sage advice, Doctor. The elevator doors closed, and Elena made her way to her room, still clutching the business card. Inside, she tossed it on the nightstand and began peeling off her snow-covered clothes, trying to shake the lingering sense that she'd just intersected with something far more significant than a stranded motorist. It wasn't until she was in the shower, hot water washing away the cold, that she remembered the way the desk clerk had reacted. She remembered the phrase Salvatore had used, family business, spoken with particular emphasis. And she remembered something else, something that had registered subconsciously but now surfaced with crystal clarity. When Salvatore had placed his hand on the counter, she'd seen his ring. Not a wedding band, but something else. A heavy signet ring with an ornate design she'd glimpsed for only a second. She'd seen rings like that before, during her residency in New York City. Her mentor had pointed them out once, quietly, during a late-night ER shift when certain patients received unusual priority treatment. Made men, he'd whispered. The rings mark them as members of the organization. When you see those rings, Elena, you treat them professionally, but you don't ask questions. Elena stood frozen under the shower spray as understanding crashed over her like ice water. Salvatore Castellano, the way he'd moved through the lobby. The clerk's terrified compliance, the emphasis on family, honor, and 3 generations of business. She hadn't rescued a stranded businessman from the snowstorm. She'd rescued a mafia boss. Elena didn't sleep well. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw that ring, heavy gold with its intricate family crest, and heard the steel beneath Salvatore's smooth words. By dawn, the storm had downgraded to light snow, and the hotel's breakfast area buzzed with travelers checking road conditions and planning their departures. She was nursing her 3rd coffee when her phone buzzed with an unknown number. Against her better judgment, she answered. Dr. Morrison. Salvatore's voice was unmistakable, rich and controlled even through the phone. I trust you slept well? Well enough, she lied, gripping her coffee cup tighter. The roads should be clear enough to travel soon. Indeed, I'm arranging transportation back to the city. I'd like to offer you a ride. My associates have appropriate vehicles for the conditions. That's not necessary. My SUV requires 4 new tires and brake work, he interrupted smoothly. I took the liberty of having a mechanic examine it this morning. The storm conditions yesterday put significant stress on your vehicle. It's not safe for highway travel. Elena's breath caught. You had someone look at my car? Without asking me? I have certain capabilities at my disposal, Salvatore said, and she could hear the faint amusement in his voice. And a debt to repay. Consider it handled. The repairs will be completed by this afternoon, and the vehicle can be delivered to your home address, or you can collect it at your convenience. Mr. Castellano, Elena said carefully, I appreciate your concern, but you didn't need to. Meet me for breakfast, he interrupted again. Presidential suite, 8th floor. We should discuss certain matters face to face. It wasn't really a request. Elena recognized the tone, polite on the surface but carrying the weight of expectation. She could refuse, walk away, drive her supposedly damaged SUV back to Boston and never think about the dangerous stranger she'd helped in a snowstorm. But something in his voice suggested this wasn't over, that walking away might not be as simple as she hoped. "I'll be there in 20 minutes, she heard herself say. The presidential suite occupied the entire 8th-floor corner, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering spectacular views of the snow-blanketed landscape. Elena knocked, her heart hammering with a mixture of apprehension and something else she didn't want to examine too closely. Salvatore opened the door himself, now dressed in fresh clothes that somehow managed to be both casual and impeccably expensive. Dark slacks and a crisp shirt with the sleeves rolled to his forearms, revealing the subtle edge of a tattoo on his left wrist. Traditional designs, the kind that told stories to those who knew how to read them. "Dr. Morrison, please come in." He stepped aside, and Elena entered a space that made her modest hotel room look like a closet. The suite had been transformed into what looked like a mobile command center, a laptop open on the dining table, several phones charging nearby, and 2 men in suits stationed discreetly near the windows. Bodyguards. The realization sent ice through Elena's veins. "Thank you, gentlemen," Salvatore said quietly, and the men withdrew to an adjoining room without a word. Their obedience was absolute, instantaneous. "Please sit. I've ordered breakfast. I wasn't certain of your preferences, so I requested variety." The table held enough food for 6 people: fresh fruit, pastries, eggs prepared 3 different ways, Italian meats and cheeses, and a carafe of coffee that smelled significantly better than the lobby brew. Elena sat, maintaining her composure through years of practice dealing with difficult situations. "You wanted to discuss something." "Your realization," Salvatore said simply, taking the seat across from her. "I saw it on your face last night, when you stepped off the elevator. You understood who I am, what I am. There was no point in denying it. The ring, I've seen them before, during my residency in New York. Observant." He poured coffee for both of them with practiced ease. "Most people don't recognize the significance, but you've worked in hospitals, dealt with all manner of patients. You've learned to see what others miss. Are you concerned I'm going to report you to someone?" Elena asked bluntly. "Because I don't even know what I'd report. You helped your driver, your car broke down, I gave you a ride. That's not a crime." "No," Salvatore agreed. "It's not. But now you're aware of my family's standing in certain communities. That knowledge changes things." "Changes them how?" He studied her over his coffee cup, those dark eyes missing nothing. "In my world, Dr. Morrison, information is currency. People who know things about me, about my organization, become either assets or liabilities. There's rarely middle ground." The threat was implicit, but unmistakable. Elena forced herself to meet his gaze steadily. "I'm a surgeon. I save children's lives. I have no interest in your world or your organization. What you do, who you are, that's none of my business." "And yet you gave me a ride," Salvatore said softly. "You offered help to a stranger in a storm, expecting nothing in return. That interests me, Dr. Morrison, because in my experience, everyone wants something. Everyone has an angle. Maybe I just have a functioning conscience. Perhaps." He leaned back, and Elena noticed how even that simple movement carried grace and power. "But now we find ourselves in an unusual situation. You've done me a service. Saved me from a dangerous situation, actually. Hypothermia can be lethal. In my culture, such debts are taken seriously." "I don't want anything from you," Elena insisted. "Just forget it happened. Forget you met me. I'll do the same. That's not how this works." Salvatore's voice carried the weight of absolute certainty. "You exist in my awareness now, and certain rivals of mine, families who would very much like to see me compromised, they have ways of discovering connections. If they learned that you helped me, showed me kindness, understanding dawned like cold water. They'd use me against you. They'd try," he corrected. which means I need to ensure your safety. It's a matter of honor, but also practicality. I don't leave loose ends, Dr. Morrison. I protect what's mine. I'm not yours to protect, Elena said sharply, standing. I appreciate the breakfast and the concern, but I don't need... The door to the suite opened and 3 more men entered. These weren't bodyguards. Their bearing was different, more authoritative. The oldest, a silver-haired man in an immaculate suit, assessed Elena with eyes that had seen everything twice. Don Castellano, he said, and Elena's breath caught at the title. Don. Not Mr., but Don. The formal acknowledgement of leadership in the organization. We have a situation that requires immediate attention. Salvatore's expression hardened. Speak, Matteo. The Russo family. They've learned about yesterday's incident on the highway. They know someone stopped to assist you. The older man's gaze flickered to Elena. They're making inquiries. Already? Salvatore stood, and suddenly the comfortable breakfast atmosphere transformed into something else entirely. How? The desk clerk. He was compromised, paid to report any unusual activity involving persons of interest. When you checked in, he made a call. Elena watched as Salvatore's jaw tightened, saw the cold fury that flashed across his features before he controlled it. The clerk will be dealt with appropriately. Already handled, Don. But the doctor... Matteo looked at Elena with something resembling pity. She's been identified. Photographed leaving the hotel with your card in her possession. The room seemed to contract around Elena. Photographed? By who? Russo's people, Salvatore said flatly. They watch hotels, airports, any location where they might gain intelligence on rival families. You were unlucky enough to be seen in my company. This is insane, Elena whispered. I helped a stranger in a snowstorm. That's all. That's literally all this was. In my world, Salvatore said quietly, his eyes locked on hers. There are no small actions. Everything has consequences. And now you're in the middle of something you didn't choose and don't understand. He turned to Matteo. Full protection detail. Immediate implementation. I want her home secured. Her hospital. Everywhere she goes. Someone watches. Don, if I may, Matteo interjected carefully. Bringing her deeper into our operations might actually increase her visibility. The Russos could interpret protection as confirmation that she's valuable to you. Then they'd be correct, Salvatore said with finality. She showed me kindness when she had every reason to drive past. That creates an obligation. Organize it, Matteo. Now. As the older man left to make arrangements, Elena found her voice. You can't just... I have a life, a career. I can't have mobsters following me to the hospital. You won't see them, Salvatore assured her. My people are professionals. They'll maintain distance, ensure your safety without interfering in your daily routine. And if I refuse? If I just walk out of here and go back to my normal life? Salvatore moved closer, and Elena was struck again by the sheer presence of him, the way he seemed to command the air itself. Then the Russo family will assume you're an easy target. They'll approach you, question you about our encounter. And if they believe you have information they want, or worse, if they believe you mean something to me, they won't be gentle in their methods. You're trying to scare me. No, he said softly, and there was something almost like regret in his dark eyes. I'm trying to protect you from a reality you didn't ask for, but now cannot escape. This is my world, Dr. Morrison. Honor and violence, loyalty and retribution. You stepped into it yesterday when you stopped your car. Now I'm doing everything in my power to make sure that act of kindness doesn't destroy you. Elena stared at him, at the dangerous elegance and the unmistakable sincerity beneath his words. She'd saved lives on operating tables, made split-second decisions that meant everything to frightened families. But this was different. This was a kind of danger she had no training for, no protocol to follow. How long? She finally asked. How long do I need this? Protection. Until the current tensions with the Russo family are resolved, Salvatore replied. Days, perhaps weeks. But Dr. Morrison, Elena, I give you my word that you will emerge from this safely. That's a promise I've never broken. The word of a mob boss, she said, trying for sarcasm but hearing the tremor in her own voice. The word of a man who understands honor, he corrected, who knows that debts must be repaid and innocence must be protected. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand. His grip was warm, strong, completely confident. I know what you see when you look at me. You see the organization, the violence, the life I was born into, but I also see you, Dr. Morrison. I see someone who stops for strangers, who dedicates her life to fixing broken hearts. That kind of goodness is rare in my world. Precious. Worth protecting. Elena looked down at their joined hands, at the heavy ring that marked him as something dangerous and powerful, and felt her carefully ordered life tilting on its axis. She thought of her patients, her apartment in Boston, the normal existence she'd built through years of dedication and discipline. All of it was about to change, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. 3 days later, Elena understood the true meaning of discreet protection. True to Salvatore's word, she couldn't identify her watchers, but she felt their presence constantly. A car that remained 3 vehicles behind her on the commute. A maintenance worker who seemed to appear whenever she took her evening walk. The subtle rearrangement of her hospital parking spot to one closer to the entrance. Her colleagues noticed nothing. Her patients received the same focused care. But Elena moved through her days with new awareness, seeing shadows where none had existed before. The package arrived on Thursday. Elena returned home from a grueling 12-hour surgery to find a discreet black box on her doorstep. No delivery markings, no return address, just expensive packaging that practically screamed discretion. Inside, nestled in black silk, lay a phone. Not just any phone, but top-of-the-line technology, with a single contact already programmed in. Salvatore. She stared at it for a long moment before it buzzed with an incoming message. For emergencies. Keep it charged. Keep it with you. SC Elena typed back, her fingers hesitant on the unfamiliar device. This isn't necessary. The response came within seconds. The Russo family made inquiries at your hospital today. Someone asked questions about your schedule. It's necessary. Ice flooded Elena's veins. She moved to her window, looking down at the quiet Boston street, seeing it differently now. Were those men in the parked sedan watching her building? Was that pedestrian with the newspaper actually reading or observing? The phone buzzed again. You're safe. I've increased the security detail. But we should talk. Face to face. I'm at work until 7 p.m. tomorrow. I'll send a car. 7:30 p.m. Please, Elena. This concerns your safety. She noticed he'd used her first name. The familiarity should have annoyed her, but instead it created an odd flutter in her chest that she immediately tried to suppress. This was dangerous. He was dangerous. The situation was spiraling beyond her control. But the alternative, waiting alone, unaware of threats she couldn't see, felt even more dangerous. Fine. 7:30. The car that arrived the following evening was a study in understated luxury. A black sedan with tinted windows and a driver who opened her door with military precision. Elena slid into leather seats that probably cost more than her monthly rent, and they glided away from her hospital into Boston's evening traffic. Where are we going? She asked the driver. The Don has arranged a private location for your meeting, Dr. Morrison. Somewhere secure. The Don. They all called him that. This title that carried centuries of tradition and modern terror. Elena watched the city roll past, noting how the driver took an indirect route, doubling back occasionally, clearly checking for surveillance. They ended up at a waterfront restaurant that looked closed, its lights dimmed despite the early evening hour. The driver opened her door and escorted her to a private entrance, where another suited man waited with the calm readiness of serious training. Dr. Morrison, this way, please. Inside, the restaurant had been transformed into something intimate. A single table set for 2 near floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Boston Harbor. Candles provided soft light, and Salvatore stood as she entered, once again dressed in that dangerous elegance that seemed effortless. "Elena, thank you for coming." He gestured to the seat across from him. "I took the liberty of ordering, but if the menu doesn't suit you, the kitchen is at your disposal." "You rented an entire restaurant for this conversation?" Elena asked, taking her seat with measured calm. "I own this restaurant," Salvatore corrected mildly. "Among other legitimate businesses. It provides a secure location, no recording devices, no observers, no interruptions. We can speak freely." A waiter appeared with wine, something red and undoubtedly expensive, before vanishing as silently as he'd arrived. Elena waited until they were alone again before speaking. "You said the Russo family came to my hospital." "Not directly. They sent intermediaries, men claiming to be insurance investigators, asking questions about staff schedules and security protocols. My people intercepted them before they could get meaningful information, but their interest confirms my concerns." Salvatore's expression was serious, controlled. "They're trying to determine if you represent an exploitable connection to me." "And do I?" Elena asked bluntly. "Represent a connection?" Salvatore was quiet for a moment, his dark eyes studying her with that same intense assessment she remembered from the snowstorm. "That's complicated." "Uncomplicated. In my world, showing special concern for someone signals either business association or personal interest. Either interpretation makes that person a potential target." He leaned forward slightly. "The Russo family believes you might be leverage against me." "They're correct, though not for the reasons they imagine." "I'm not leverage," Elena protested. "We met by accident. I gave you a ride. That's not—" "You showed me kindness," Salvatore interrupted quietly. "Genuine, selfless kindness in a moment when I was vulnerable. Do you understand how rare that is in my life? How unprecedented?" Elena felt heat rising in her cheeks. "Anyone would have done the same." "No," he said with absolute certainty. "Most people would have recognized my vehicle's value and either exploited the situation or avoided it entirely. You did neither. You simply helped." His voice softened. "That matters to me, Elena. More than is perhaps wise." The admission hung between them, weighted with implications neither seemed ready to fully acknowledge. Elena found herself studying him, really looking at this man who commanded absolute loyalty and inspired genuine fear. She saw the controlled power, yes, but also something else. Weariness, perhaps. Isolation. The burden of carrying a legacy built on violence and honor in equal measure. "Tell me about your family," she heard herself say. "The legitimate parts. What you would have been if you'd had a choice." Salvatore smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his dangerous features. "My grandfather came from Sicily with nothing but determination and old-world principles. He built an empire through intelligence and ruthlessness, yes, but also through understanding loyalty. My father expanded what my grandfather created, brought organization and structure to chaos." He paused. "And I inherited it all. The power, the respect, the blood obligations that can never be fully repaid. Did you want it? This life? Want doesn't factor into legacy," he replied. "My path was chosen before I was born, but I've tried to honor my family's code while adapting to changing times. Some of our operations, the restaurants, real estate investments, import businesses, those are completely legitimate. Others—" He trailed off meaningfully. "The less legal ones," Elena finished. "Let's say they occupy gray areas, protection services, conflict resolution, facilitation of difficult transactions. Nothing that creates victims, but nothing entirely above board either." He met her gaze directly. "I won't lie to you, Elena. My hands aren't clean. The position I hold requires difficult decisions, actions that would horrify someone with your profession's healing principles." "Why are you telling me this?" Elena asked, even as her heart hammered against her ribs. "Because you deserve honesty. Because if we're to navigate this situation safely, you need to understand what you're dealing with." Salvatore reached across the table slowly, palm up, an invitation rather than a demand. And because I find myself wanting you to see me clearly, not just the title or the organization, but the man beneath. Elena stared at his outstretched hand, at the ring that marked him as something her safe, controlled life should never intersect with. She thought of her patience, her reputation, the career she'd built through years of sacrifice. Touching that hand meant acknowledging a connection that went beyond gratitude for a snowstorm rescue. It meant stepping willingly into his world. Her hand moved before her mind fully approved, closing around his with startling certainty. His grip was warm, strong, and impossibly gentle. The contact sent an electric shock through her system, awareness, attraction, and terrifying recognition all at once. "This is insane," she whispered. "Yes," Salvatore agreed, his thumb brushing across her knuckles in a gesture that was both possessive and reverent. "Completely insane. You're everything my world shouldn't touch. Good, principled, dedicated to saving lives while I've built my legacy on taking them when necessary. Then why? Because from the moment you stepped out of your car in that snowstorm, you've been in my thoughts constantly," he interrupted, raw honesty breaking through his usual control. "Because in 34 years of this life, I've never met someone who looked at me without fear or calculation. You saw a man stranded in a storm. Not a don, not a threat. Just someone who needed help." The waiter reappeared with their first course, giving Elena a moment to process. The food was exquisite, probably, but she barely tasted it. Her entire awareness had narrowed to the man across from her. This dangerous, powerful, impossibly compelling contradiction. "What happens now?" she asked once they were alone again. "Now," Salvatore said carefully, "we address the immediate security concerns. The Russo family needs to understand that pursuing you would be inadvisable. I'm arranging a meeting with their leadership, making our position clear." "Our position?" "That you're under my protection. That any move against you will be considered a direct assault on my family." His expression hardened. "They'll accept that, because the alternative is war, and neither family wants that escalation currently." "And after? When the protection isn't necessary anymore?" Salvatore was quiet for a long moment, conflict visible in his dark eyes. "That depends on what you want, Elena. I can fade back into my world, ensure your safety from a distance, let you return to your normal life. Or, her voice came out barely above a whisper, or we acknowledge what's building between us. We explore this impossible connection with full awareness of the complications involved." He leaned forward, intensity radiating from every line of his body. "I'm not a good man by your standards. My life involves things you'd find unconscionable. But I would never let that world touch you. I would protect you with everything I have." "That's not a normal relationship offer," Elena said, trying for levity but hearing the tremor in her words. "Nothing about us is normal," Salvatore replied, a faint smile touching his lips. "But if there's one thing I've learned in this life, it's that rare things, precious things, are worth protecting, worth fighting for, worth the risk." Elena's phone, the regular one, buzzed with a hospital notification. A patient's labs, scheduled for her review. The simple reminder of her ordinary life crashed against this extraordinary moment like waves against stone. "I need time," she said finally, "to think, to process all of this." "Of course." Salvatore released her hand, though she saw the reluctance in the gesture. "But Elena, while you're thinking, let me show you something." He stood and offered his arm. After a moment's hesitation, Elena accepted, letting him guide her to the restaurant's windows. Boston Harbor spread before them, lights reflecting off dark water, the city's skyline framing their view. "This city," Salvatore said quietly, "my family has protected certain aspects of it for 3 generations. We've built hospitals, funded schools, ensured neighborhoods stay safe from worse elements. Not out of altruism, we're not heroes, but because stability serves our interests." "You're trying to justify your world to me," Elena observed. "No, I'm trying to help you see that it's not purely black and white. That power, when wielded with honor, can do both harm and good." He turned to face her fully. "I was born into this life. But I've tried to live it according to principles my grandfather taught me. Loyalty above all, protection of innocence, justice when the law fails to provide it. Vigilante justice isn't justice, Elena countered. Perhaps not in your courtroom world, but in mine it's all we have. Salvatore's expression grew distant. When I was 12, I watched my uncle, a good man, despite our family business, get betrayed by someone who should have been loyal. Traditional justice couldn't touch the traitor. He had connections, money, legal protections. What happened? My grandfather handled it. Personally. The message was clear. Betrayal has consequences. And every day since, I've watched men hold to their oaths because they understand that our code means something. He focused back on her. I'm not asking you to approve of my methods, Elena. I'm asking you to understand that in my world, honor isn't abstract. It's survival. They stood there in silence, Elena processing layers of moral complexity she'd never had to consider. Her life had been clean, purposeful. Save the children, follow the protocols, trust the systems. Salvatore's world operated by different rules entirely, where power and loyalty created their own form of order. I should go, she finally said. Early surgery tomorrow. I'll have my driver take you home. Salvatore walked her toward the exit, his hand resting lightly on her lower back, a touch that was both protective and intimate. Think about what I've said. And Elena, please use the phone I gave you. It's secure, untraceable. If anything concerns you, anything at all, you contact me immediately. Playing bodyguard for a pediatric surgeon probably isn't your usual business, Elena said as they reached the car. No, Salvatore agreed, opening her door himself. But then, you're not usual business. He leaned in slightly, close enough that she could smell his cologne, feel the heat of his presence. You're something far more dangerous, someone who makes me question every rule I've lived by. Before Elena could respond, he'd stepped back, gesturing to his driver. The car pulled away from the restaurant, carrying her back toward her normal world, leaving Salvatore standing in the shadows, a figure of power and complexity that had crashed into her life like a storm. Elena pressed her fingers to the window, watching him disappear from view, and realized with startling clarity that her carefully constructed life had just transformed into something she couldn't control. And the most terrifying part was how much that realization excited her. The phone Salvatore had given her buzzed as she neared home. A single message, simple but weighted with everything unsaid. You're not alone in this. Whatever you decide, I respect it. But know that from the moment you stopped in that snowstorm, you changed something in me that I didn't know could change. As Elena stared at the words until they blurred, her heart pounding with fear and attraction and impossible hope, tomorrow she would return to surgery, to saving children's hearts with precise skill and medical training. But tonight, she sat in the back of a mob boss's car, holding a phone that connected her to a world of danger and honor and dark fascination, and wondered if her own heart was about to make the riskiest decision of her life. The Russo family's next move came faster than anyone anticipated. And when it did, Elena would learn exactly what it meant to be connected to Salvatore Castellano, to be precious to a man whose word was law, whose protection was absolute, and whose world was about to collide with hers in ways neither of them could prevent. The hospital's emergency entrance erupted with controlled chaos at 2 a.m. when Elena received the call. Not her usual pager, the secure phone Salvatore had given her, vibrating insistently against her nightstand. Elena. His voice carried an edge she hadn't heard before, urgency wrapped in steel control. I need you to listen carefully. Don't panic, but follow my instructions exactly. She was already sitting up, adrenaline flooding her system. What's happened? The Russo family made their move. They've attempted to breach your apartment building's security. My people intercepted them, but the situation is escalating. A pause, then quieter. I'm sending a team to bring you somewhere secure. They'll be there in 4 minutes. Pack essentials, medications, documents, nothing more. Go. Elena's medical training kicked in, suppressing panic in favor of focused action. She threw clothes into a bag, grabbed her passport and medical credentials, was pulling on shoes when 3 sharp knocks sounded at her door. "Dr. Morrison, Team Delta, sent by Don Castellano." She checked the peephole. 3 men in dark suits, professional bearing, one holding a phone displaying a verification code Salvatore had texted her seconds earlier. Elena opened the door to organized efficiency. "Ma'am, we need to move now. There's a secondary team approaching from the east entrance." The lead agent, broad-shouldered with the calm readiness of serious training, gestured toward the stairwell. "Service exit, 2 floors down. Vehicles waiting." They moved as a unit, Elena protected in the center, their coordination speaking to extensive experience. She caught glimpses of other men stationed at key points, Salvatore's people, ensuring her safe extraction. The professional precision was both reassuring and terrifying. The SUV waiting in the underground garage was armored. Elena recognized the weight in how it sat, the thickness of the windows. She was ushered into the back seat, and they were moving before her door fully closed. "Where are we going?" she asked, forcing her voice steady. "Secure location. Don's orders. He's meeting us there." The driver's eyes met hers in the rearview mirror. "You're safe, Dr. Morrison. The Don has been very explicit about your protection." They drove for 30 minutes, leaving Boston proper for the suburbs, finally turning down a private drive that wound through wooded property. The house that appeared was substantial, a modern estate that managed to look both elegant and fortress-like. Salvatore stood at the entrance, flanked by 4 men who immediately dispersed to perimeter positions when the SUV arrived. He moved to Elena's door before her escort could open it, his hand extended to help her out. "Are you hurt?" His dark eyes scanned her with focused intensity, hands checking for injuries with surprising gentleness. "I'm fine." Confused and terrified, but physically fine. Elena looked up at the house. "What is this place?" "One of several secure properties my family maintains, fully protected, off any official records." He guided her inside, his hand never leaving her lower back. "Elena, I'm sorry. I underestimated how quickly the Russos would act." The interior was luxurious but functional, a command center disguised as an upscale home. Monitors showed security feeds from multiple angles, communications equipment lined one wall, and several of Salvatore's people worked with quiet efficiency. Matteo, the silver-haired consigliere, approached with controlled urgency. "Don, the Russo delegation is requesting a sit-down. They claim their men were merely conducting surveillance, not attempting abduction." "They're lying," Salvatore said flatly. "They brought 3 vehicles and tactical equipment. That's not surveillance. That's an extraction team." His jaw tightened. "Set the meeting. Neutral ground tomorrow at noon. Full protocol." "Don, bringing Dr. Morrison deeper into family operations is already done," Salvatore interrupted, his voice carrying absolute authority. "The Russos forced this escalation. Now we respond appropriately." He turned to Elena. "I need to handle certain matters. Sophia will show you to a guest room. Everything you need is provided. We'll talk more when I'm finished." A woman in her 50s, elegant and efficient, materialized at Elena's side. "Dr. Morrison, this way, please. I imagine you could use some tea." Elena followed, her mind racing through implications and consequences. She'd been extracted from her home by armed men, brought to a secret location, and was now essentially in protective custody. Her life, the normal, predictable life she'd built, had been completely upended. The guest room was surprisingly comfortable, decorated with understated elegance. Sophia provided tea, fresh clothes in Elena's size, which raised questions she wasn't ready to ask, and a gentle demeanor that somehow made the surreal situation feel manageable. "I've worked for the Castellano family for 30 years, Sophia said quietly, setting out toiletries. "I've never seen the Don personally oversee protection detail like this. You must be very important to him." "I barely know him," Elena protested. "We met in a snowstorm, that's all." Sophia smiled with the wisdom of decades observing powerful men. "That's not all, dear. And I think you know it." She moved toward the door, pausing. "Don Castellano is a hard man. His position requires it. But he's also honorable in ways most people wouldn't understand. If he's chosen to protect you, that protection is absolute. Nothing will touch you while he lives. The phrase, while he lives, sent ice through Elena's veins. She hadn't truly considered, what Salvatore risked by protecting her. In his world, showing weakness meant inviting attack. Caring about someone meant giving enemies a weapon. She'd become his vulnerability. Elena was staring out the window at the wooded grounds when Salvatore knocked softly 2 hours later. She called for him to enter, turning to find him looking exhausted in a way that went beyond physical tiredness. "I've arranged the meeting with the Russos," he said, leaning against the doorframe. "They'll agree to back off in exchange for certain territorial concessions, business matters that don't concern you." "Everything about this concerns me now," Elena countered. "I'm the reason you're making concessions." "No, you're the reason I'm choosing to negotiate rather than retaliate." Salvatore moved into the room, and Elena noticed he'd removed his suit jacket, rolled his shirt sleeves. The casual disarray somehow made him more human, less untouchable. "In my world, an attack on someone under my protection typically triggers immediate and severe consequences. But war, real war between families, creates casualties beyond those directly involved. So you're being reasonable because of me. I'm being strategic because of you," he corrected. "There's a difference. The Russos understand that my restraint isn't weakness, it's calculation. They also understand that if they push further, that restraint ends." Elena sat on the bed's edge, suddenly overwhelmed by exhaustion and emotion. "I should never have stopped in that snowstorm." Salvatore crossed the room in 3 strides, dropping to one knee in front of her so their eyes were level. Don't regret the kindness that defines who you are." His hands covered hers, warm and impossibly gentle. "I've lived my entire life in a world where compassion is weakness, where trust is currency, where human connection is transactional. And then you, a woman who saves children's hearts for a living, you stop your car in a blizzard to help a stranger." "I didn't know—" "Exactly," he interrupted, his dark eyes intense. "You didn't know who I was, what I could do for you, whether I was dangerous. You just saw someone who needed help." His thumb brushed across her knuckles. "Elena, in 34 years, no one has ever looked at me and seen just a man. You did. And that changed something fundamental." "This is impossible," Elena whispered. "Your world and mine, they can't coexist. They're coexisting right now." Salvatore's voice dropped to barely audible. "I'm a man who's done things that would horrify you, built my legacy on violence and intimidation. You're a woman who dedicates her life to healing and saving innocence. It shouldn't work." "But Elena?" He reached up, cupping her face with a tenderness that contradicted everything his reputation promised. "I've never wanted anything as much as I want to make this work." Elena's breath caught as he leaned closer, giving her every opportunity to pull away. When their lips met, it was electric, a connection that transcended logic and defied every rational objection. His kiss was controlled intensity, restrained passion, a glimpse of the man beneath the dawn's authority. When they separated, both breathing unsteadily, Salvatore rested his forehead against hers. "I can't promise you normal. I can't promise you safe in the conventional sense. But I can promise you that every resource I have, every man who swears loyalty to my family, every bit of power I've spent my life accumulating, all of it protects you now." "That's not a relationship," Elena said, even as her hands gripped his shirt. "That's a security arrangement." "Then let me offer you this." Salvatore pulled back enough to meet her eyes fully. "I want to know everything about you. What you love, what scares you, what makes you laugh at 3 a.m. I want to sit in hospital cafeterias while you work impossible hours. I want to bore you with stories about my grandfather's old-world wisdom and my struggles to honor tradition while adapting to modern realities." "You want to date me," Elena said, slightly incredulous, "while running a crime organization." "I want to build something with you," he corrected. something that exists separately from the organization, from the obligations and the violence. A space where we're just Elena and Salvatore, two people trying to understand this impossible connection. A knock at the door interrupted them. Matteo's voice carried through. "Dawn, we have a situation developing. The Russos moved the meeting time up. They want to talk now." Salvatore's expression hardened instantly. "Stall them. I'll be there in 5 minutes." He turned back to Elena, conflict visible in his features. "I have to handle this. But when I return, if you're willing, we continue this conversation." "Be careful," Elena found herself saying. "Always." He stood, then hesitated at the door. "Elena, what you said earlier about regretting the snowstorm, promise me you won't think that way. Because despite everything, the complications, the danger, the impossible circumstances, I can't regret that you stopped. Even if it costs me, I can't regret you." He left before she could respond, leaving Elena alone with her racing thoughts and the lingering warmth of his kiss. Through the window, she watched SUVs pulling out of the driveway, carrying Salvatore toward a meeting with rivals who wanted to use her as leverage against him. She'd become exactly what she'd feared, a weapon in a war she didn't understand, a vulnerability for a man who couldn't afford weaknesses. But somewhere beneath that fear was something else. Something that felt like recognition, like destiny, like the terrifying inevitability of two incompatible worlds colliding and creating something neither could have predicted. Elena touched her lips, still feeling the ghost of his kiss, and realized she was already too deep to simply walk away. The question was whether she'd survive the depths she was descending into. The meeting with the Russos lasted 3 hours. Elena spent them pacing the guest room, checking her secure phone obsessively, and trying not to imagine worst-case scenarios. When Salvatore finally returned, the sky was lightening with pre-dawn gray. She heard him before she saw him, his voice in the hallway, issuing quiet commands. Then her door opened, and he stood there looking like controlled fury barely contained. "It's handled," he said without preamble. "They've agreed to cease all surveillance and inquiries regarding you. In exchange, I've made territorial concessions that my capos are not happy about." "What kind of concessions?" "The kind that cost money and influence." Salvatore moved into the room, and Elena noticed blood on his shirt cuff. "Nothing that compromises our core operations, but enough that the Russos feel they've gained something from this confrontation. You're bleeding." He glanced at his wrist dismissively. Marco Russo thought physical intimidation would strengthen his negotiating position. He learned otherwise. Elena's medical instincts overrode everything else. "Let me see." "It's nothing." "Let me see," she repeated, using the voice that made surgical residents snap to attention. "I'm a doctor. That's not negotiable." Salvatore's expression softened slightly. He crossed to where she stood and extended his arm, allowing her to examine the cut along his forearm. Defensive wound, probably from deflecting a blade. Not deep, but it needed cleaning. "The bathroom has a first aid kit," he said quietly. "Sophia stocks them obsessively." Elena retrieved the supplies and worked with practiced efficiency, cleaning the wound while Salvatore watched her with that intensity that made her breath catch. His proximity, the warmth of his body, the subtle scent of his cologne mixed with the metallic tang of blood, created an intimacy that transcended the medical care. "You should have stitches," she said, applying butterfly closures. "But this will hold if you're careful." "I'm rarely careful." But his voice held warmth now, the fury from earlier dissipating. "Thank you." "Did you hurt him badly, Marco Russo?" "Not permanently. Just enough to establish that threatening what's mine carries immediate consequences." Salvatore's free hand came up to cup her cheek, his touch gentle despite the violence implicit in his words. "Elena, I need you to understand something. What happened tonight, the meeting, the confrontation, that's my world. That's what being connected to me means. I'm starting to realize that." "Are you frightened?" Elena considered the question honestly. "Yes, but not of you. Of the situation, the danger, the fact that I'm in over my head." She met his dark eyes. But also, and this probably makes me crazy, I've never felt more alive. Something shifted in Salvatore's expression. Surprise, perhaps, or recognition. That's how I feel every moment around you. Like I've been sleepwalking through my life, and you woke something fundamental. He leaned in slowly, giving her time to object, and kissed her with barely restrained passion. Elena responded without thinking, her hands sliding into his hair, pulling him closer. The kiss deepened into something desperate and hungry, weeks of tension and attraction igniting into undeniable need. When they finally separated, both breathing hard, Salvatore rested his forehead against hers. "Stay with me. Not here at the safe house, at my home. Let me show you parts of my life beyond the organization. Let me prove that there's more to me than the dawn." "That's dangerous," Elena whispered, getting closer, letting this become real. "Everything about us is dangerous." His hands framed her face with reverent care. "But I've spent my entire life managing danger, calculating risks, protecting what matters. You matter, Elena. More than territory, more than reputation. You matter." Before Elena could respond, her secure phone buzzed with a hospital emergency code. One of her patients, a 6-year-old with a complex congenital defect she'd operated on 2 weeks ago, was crashing. "I have to go," she said, already moving. "My patient, I'll take you." Salvatore was immediately in motion, calling orders through his phone. "Full escort, fastest route to Boston General, 10 minutes. "Salvatore, you can't—" "I absolutely can," he interrupted. "Your patient needs you. Everything else is secondary." The authority in his voice was absolute, but beneath it ran genuine concern. "Besides, this is who you are. This is the Elena I—" He stopped himself. "This is why you stopped in that snowstorm. You save lives. I won't interfere with that." The drive to Boston General broke every traffic law. Salvatore's SUV moving through pre-dawn streets with efficiency that suggested careful planning. Elena used the time to review her patient's chart on her tablet, preparing for what she'd face. At the hospital entrance, Salvatore caught her hand. "Go. Save your patient. I'll be here when you finish." "You can't wait in a hospital parking lot." "I absolutely can," he repeated with a faint smile. "Go, doctor. Show them what you do." Elena ran, her mind already shifting into surgical mode, but part of her awareness remained tethered to the man in the SUV behind her, the dangerous, powerful, impossibly compelling presence who'd just rearranged his entire schedule to get her to a dying child. The surgery lasted 8 hours. Complex, delicate work that required every bit of Elena's skill and training. When she finally emerged, exhausted but triumphant, she found Salvatore exactly where she'd left him, standing beside his SUV in the parking garage, flanked by 2 discreet bodyguards. "Your patient?" he asked immediately. "Stable. Good prognosis." Elena felt tears prick her eyes, the crash of adrenaline and emotion that always followed high-stakes procedures. "She's going to be okay." Salvatore closed the distance between them and pulled her into his arms, holding her with surprising gentleness while she trembled against his chest. "You're remarkable," he murmured against her hair. "Absolutely remarkable." They stood there for a long moment, Elena drawing strength from his solid presence while Salvatore simply held her, offering silent support. When she finally pulled back, his expression held something new. Not just attraction or fascination, but deep respect. "Take me home," she said quietly. "To your home. Show me who Salvatore Castellano is when he's not being the Don." The explosion that nearly killed them both came without warning 3 weeks later on a Thursday evening. Elena had just left the hospital after another marathon surgery when Salvatore's SUV pulled up. A routine they'd established, his quiet way of ensuring her safety while respecting her independence. She slid into the passenger seat, greeting him with a kiss that had become wonderfully familiar. "How was surgery?" Salvatore asked, pulling into traffic with easy confidence. "Successful. Complicated repair, but the baby should have a normal life now." Elena settled into the leather seat, feeling the day's exhaustion. "Your meeting with the waterfront contractors?" "Less violent than anticipated. he said with dry humor. Though Marco Benedetti needed reminding about our agreement regarding... The explosion cut off his words, a massive fireball erupting from a parked vehicle 2 cars ahead. Salvatore's reflexes saved them. He yanked the wheel hard right, powering through a gap that shouldn't have existed, while the world turned orange and deafening. They crashed through a storefront window, airbags deploying, glass shattering into diamond rain. Elena's world became impact and confusion, her medical training cataloging injuries even through shock. Her head struck something, warm blood trickling down her temple, Salvatore shouting orders into his phone. "Elena! Elena! Look at me!" His voice cut through the ringing in her ears. "Are you hurt?" Maybe... She tried to organize her thoughts. What happened? Car bomb. Meant for us. Salvatore was already moving, pulling her from the wreckage with surprising gentleness despite his obvious urgency. The Russos violated our agreement. They just declared war. Men materialized from nowhere. Salvatore's security team, converging with military precision. They formed a protective barrier while sirens wailed in the distance. The SUV they'd been driving was armored. She realized that now, understood why they'd survived. "Hospital," Elena managed. "We need... private facility," Salvatore countered, blood streaming from a cut on his forehead. "My organization maintains medical resources. We can't risk a public hospital right now." The facility they reached was indeed medical, a discreet building that housed fully equipped examination rooms. The doctor who met them was professional and efficient, clearly experienced with treating injuries that couldn't be officially reported. Elena's injuries were minor: concussion protocol, bruising, cuts from glass. Salvatore's were more concerning: deep laceration on his shoulder, possible cracked ribs. She watched with clinical concern as he was treated, his face set in lines of cold fury she'd never seen before. "The Russos," he said quietly to Matteo, who'd arrived within minutes, "have made a fatal error. They attempted to eliminate an innocent woman under my explicit protection. That's not a territorial dispute. That's a declaration of total war. Don, if we respond with full force..." "We respond appropriately," Salvatore interrupted. "Call a meeting of the 5 families. Everyone needs to understand what the Russos did, the line they crossed. Elena isn't part of our world's conflicts. She's a doctor who saves children. Attacking her violates every code we claim to honor." Elena listened to this, feeling surreal detachment. She'd nearly died. A bomb had nearly killed her for the crime of caring about the wrong man. "I need air," she said suddenly, standing too fast. The room spun, but she pushed through, needing space. Salvatore was beside her immediately. "Elena, I almost died," she whispered. "We almost died. Because of your life, your world." "I know." His voice was raw with genuine fear. "When I saw that explosion, realized we were the target. Elena, I've faced death dozens of times. But I've never felt terror like I felt in that moment, knowing you were in danger because of me." "Maybe this is a sign," Elena said, tears streaming. "Maybe we're too different, too impossible." "No." Salvatore cupped her face with infinite tenderness. "Don't let them do this. Don't let the Russos' attack convince you that what we have isn't worth fighting for." "How can I not?" Elena demanded. "When it nearly got me killed." "Because I won't let it," Salvatore said with absolute conviction. "What happened tonight, that ends now. The Russos will learn that there are consequences for crossing certain lines." The meeting of the 5 families happened at midnight in a restaurant closed for private business. Elena insisted on attending, against Salvatore's wishes, but he ultimately conceded. The gathering was tense, powerful men assessing each other with decades of history informing every glance. Salvatore commanded the head of the table with natural authority. "Gentlemen," he began, "we're here because the Russo family violated fundamental codes. They attempted to eliminate a civilian, a surgeon who saves children's lives, because she showed me kindness. That's not business. That's an attack on everything we claim to honor." Antonio Russo leaned back with calculated indifference. Your woman was collateral in a legitimate operation against your organization. If she's choosing to associate with our world, she accepts our world's risks. The temperature in the room dropped. Salvatore's expression became absolute cold fury barely contained. Dr. Morrison isn't part of our world, he said quietly, the soft voice somehow more terrifying than shouting. She's a healer who stopped to help a stranger. Your attack on her was an attack on the principle that innocence remains separate from our conflicts. Pretty words from a man going soft, Russo sneered. You've made concessions, shown weakness, all for some woman. Maybe the Castellano family needs new leadership. The other family heads shifted uncomfortably. Russo had just openly challenged Salvatore's position. Salvatore stood slowly. Mr. Russo, you've made several miscalculations tonight. First, believing my restraint was weakness. Second, thinking you could harm someone under my protection without consequences. Third, his voice dropped, suggesting I'm unfit to lead. What are you going to do, Castellano? I'm going to remind you why my family has held power for 3 generations. What happened next was too fast for Elena to process. Salvatore moved with deadly efficiency, closing the distance before anyone could react. There was no drawn-out confrontation, just sudden, overwhelming force that left Russo on the floor, disarmed and humiliated. I don't start wars, Salvatore said, standing over him. I end them. Your attempt on Dr. Morrison's life was the last hostile act your family makes against mine. You will issue a formal apology, pay restitution, and accept territorial losses. Or, he paused, we can resolve this the old way. You and I, traditional rules, final outcome. The room went silent. Salvatore had invoked ancient code, personal combat between leaders. Winner takes all. Russo, nursing his pride, couldn't refuse without appearing cowardly. You want old-school resolution? Fine. Tomorrow night, the warehouse district. Accepted, Salvatore said immediately. Traditional weapons, no interference. As the meeting dissolved, Elena grabbed his arm. Are you insane? You're injured and you just agreed to fight. I agreed to end this, Salvatore corrected. One way or another. What if you lose? I won't. Simple confidence. Because losing means you're unprotected, and that's not acceptable. The next hours were agony. Elena watched Salvatore prepare with his inner circle, strategy, scenarios, checking his injuries. He was calm, focused. Elena, meanwhile, was falling apart. You don't have to watch, Salvatore said that evening. Matteo can keep you somewhere safe. I'm watching, Elena said firmly. If you're doing this because of me, I'm bearing witness. He came up behind her, arms encircling her waist. I'm doing this because it's necessary. But yes, you're the reason I must win. Before you, survival was about legacy. Now? His grip tightened. Now I have something infinitely more precious to protect. The warehouse at midnight was surreal. Abandoned buildings, multiple family representatives as observers. Elena stood with Matteo, her heart hammering. Traditional weapons meant knives, close quarters, brutal. Antonio Russo was larger, younger, but Salvatore moved with confidence of someone who'd survived through skill. Elena couldn't watch, but couldn't look away. The fight was viciously efficient, 2 dangerous men trying to end each other. Salvatore's injuries showed, but his experience was evident. When it ended, Russo on the ground, disarmed, Salvatore's blade at his throat, Elena felt tears streaming. Yield, Salvatore said quietly, and accept the terms. Or die. Choose. I yield, Russo gasped. Family yields. Salvatore stepped back. Around them, witnesses nodded, honor satisfied, conflict resolved. Elena ran to him the moment protocol allowed. Salvatore caught her, wincing but holding tight. It's over, he murmured. You're safe now, Elena. Truly safe. Don't ever do that again, she demanded through tears. For you? Salvatore pulled back to meet her eyes. I'd risk everything, because you're not just something I want. You're everything I never knew I needed. 6 weeks later, Elena brought Salvatore to her parents' home for Sunday dinner. Her father, initially horrified, had gradually softened. Her mother had simply asked if Elena was happy. Deliriously, Elena had admitted. And terrified, and more alive than I've ever been. That night, standing on Salvatore's estate balcony with Boston's lights spread before them, he moved behind her, arms encircling her waist. "Your father threatened experimental heart surgery if I hurt you," Salvatore said with amusement. "I think he's warming to me. Threats are how he shows affection." Elena leaned back. "What about you?" "Overwhelmed by how much I want this," Salvatore corrected. "Not just you, though you're the center, but this. Family, connection, building something beyond power. You've shown me possibilities I never imagined." Elena turned in his arms. "I love you," she said simply, the first time either had spoken the words. "I love you despite all the reasons I shouldn't. I love you because of who you are. I love you because you showed me that impossible things can become inevitable." Salvatore's expression transformed with raw emotion. "Elena Morrison, you stopped your car in a blizzard and saved me in ways beyond hypothermia. You've given me something I never believed I deserved. Genuine love." He cupped her face. "I love you. With everything I am, everything I have, I love you." The kiss held promises and certainty. When they separated, both smiling, the future stretched before them, complicated and unpredictable, dangerous and wonderful. "So," Elena said lightly, "what's our next impossible challenge?" Salvatore laughed. "Well, my mother is arriving from Italy next month. Very traditional, very opinionated, very invested in eventual marriage-producing heirs." "Marriage?" Elena's heart skipped. "Are you—" "Eventually," Salvatore said, eyes warm with promise. "When you're ready. When you've decided that a life with me, with all its complications, that's what you want permanently." "I already know," Elena replied steadily. "I want the man who protected me, who honored my work, who fought for me. I want you, Salvatore. Every complicated, dangerous, wonderful part." He kissed her again, softer, reverent. "Then eventually becomes soon. Because I've learned from you that the best things are worth stopping for, worth protecting, worth building everything around." As night deepened over Boston, Elena and Salvatore stood together, the healer and the dawn, the woman who stopped in a snowstorm and the man whose world she'd entered. Two people who'd found something neither had known they were searching for. It wasn't the life Elena had planned. It wasn't safe or predictable. But standing in Salvatore's arms, feeling the certainty of his love, Elena knew she'd made the right choice when she stopped on that snowy highway. Some encounters change everything. Some acts of kindness create destinies. Some impossible connections become inevitable truth, and some snowstorms lead to forever.